The galaxy had always been a place of empires, rising and falling like waves on a restless ocean. Among them stood the Velthari Dominion, a race of tall, silver-skinned beings with eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. They were feared for their advanced technology, their cruel efficiency, and their long history of conquest. Where the Velthari marched, worlds bent their knees or burned. Earth had been the latest target of their expansion. Humanity was young compared to the Velthari, but unlike other species, humans did not surrender easily. Against all odds, the fleets of Earth fought battle after battle, refusing to bow down. The Velthari won most of those clashes, but at great cost. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion realized that defeating a new species would not be quick or simple. So the Velthari Queen made a choice. Instead of endless war, she would try peace, though not the kind of peace humans hoped for. To bind Earth under her rule, she demanded something strange: a marriage. One human leader would join her throne as consort, a symbol of unity and control. And so, Commander Elias Kale, a decorated human officer, was chosen. Elias stood inside the great throne chamber of the Velthari Palace, a place built from black crystal and silver steel. The walls shimmered with alien light, tall windows revealing the endless stars. At the far end of the hall sat Queen Saranya Velthor, ruler of the Dominion. She was tall, elegant, and frightening. Her silver skin caught the light like a blade. Her gown flowed like liquid metal, and a crown of crystal rested upon her brow. But her eyes, cold, glowing violet, showed only disdain when they fell upon Elias. To her, he was a compromise, a reminder that her empire could not simply crush humanity into dust. He was not a king in her mind. He was a tool, a symbol, nothing more. When Elias walked toward her that first day, Saranya shivered not from fear, but from disgust. His body looked fragile, his frame shorter than her own. His skin seemed soft, weak compared to the armor-like flesh of her kind. How could such a creature stand beside her on the throne? The nobles whispered behind their jeweled masks. Some laughed quietly, others sneered. To them, Elias was no husband. He was a pet dressed in military uniform. But Elias did not bow his head to their laughter. He walked with calm steps, his eyes steady, his face calm. He did not look angry, nor did he look afraid. He simply met the queen's gaze and held it. That unsettled her more than she cared to. Days turned into weeks. The marriage ceremony was cold, formal, without warmth. Saranya avoided Elias whenever possible. When protocol demanded they appear together, she made her distaste clear. She sat apart from him, speaking little, her face carved from ice. The court followed her example. Velthari nobles mocked Elias at every chance. They insulted his species, questioned his strength, and treated him as a fragile ornament in their midst. Yet Elias never lashed out. He never raised his voice. He listened. He observed. And sometimes, when insults cut deepest, he simply looked back at them with those calm, steady eyes. It was not defiance in the usual sense. It was not rage or arrogance. It was something quieter, stronger, the look of a man who had faced worse and refused to be broken. Saranya told herself it was meaningless. She told herself humans were weak, stubborn creatures who clung to pride only because they had nothing else. And yet in the privacy of her chambers, she found herself remembering that gaze. Why had it unsettled her so? One evening, a grand banquet filled the palace halls. Saranya sat upon her throne while nobles gathered to feast. They boasted of victories, traded clever insults, and showed off wealth. Elias sat beside her, silent, ignored by most. But as the nobles drank, arguments sparked. Two houses began a shouting match over territory rights. The queen prepared to silence them with a command, but before she could, Elias spoke. "Perhaps," he said calmly, "there is a middle path, one where both houses gain advantage." The room fell silent. Nobles stared at him in shock. How dare a human speak in their council? But Elias continued, explaining carefully, pointing out benefits that neither side had considered. His words were simple, but his logic was sound. The two houses glared, unwilling to admit he was right. But Serenia noticed how the hall shifted. Whispers spread. Some nobles nodded in quiet agreement. Later, when the crowd dispersed, Serenia confronted him. "You think yourself clever? Human? You believe you can teach us politics?" Elias only looked at her. His voice was calm. "I do not seek to teach, only to serve the peace between us. But I will not sit in silence while foolish pride pushes us all closer to war." Something in his eyes made her pause. He did not speak as a man seeking her favor. He spoke as someone who truly believed in his duty. Time passed, and Elise's presence in court grew harder to ignore. He noticed things others overlooked: alliances hidden beneath false smiles, patterns in supply routes, whispers of unrest among minor houses. He was not a warrior in their eyes, yet he wielded knowledge like a blade. Serenia watched him in secret. She told herself it was only caution. She had to know what her human consort plotted. But in truth, curiosity had taken root. How did this fragile creature see what her nobles did not? Why did his gaze never falter? Still, she held her pride close. When he walked beside her in public, she kept her distance. When he offered advice, she often dismissed it before later considering it in silence. The queen of the Velthari could not admit respect for a human. Not yet. One day, word came from the borders. A rival empire, long silent, was gathering fleets. The Krith Dominion, enemies as ruthless as they were cunning, had taken notice of Velthari weakness. They saw the queen's marriage to a human as a sign of decline. Soon, they would strike. In the War Council, nobles debated furiously. Some demanded immediate mobilization. Others argued for waiting. Voices clashed, pride outweighing reason. Elias sat quietly, listening. When at last he spoke, the chamber turned cold. "They will attack within weeks," he said, "and they will strike where you least expect." A noble laughed bitterly. "And how would a human know this?" Elias did not flinch. "Because it is what I would do." The hall erupted in anger. How dare he presume to understand galactic warfare? Serenia silenced them with a gesture, her eyes locked on Elias. His calm, steady tone unsettled her again. When the council ended, she found herself alone with him. "You presume much," she said coldly. "Do you think yourself wiser than centuries of Velthari strategy?" Elias met her gaze, and once more, there was no fear. No submission, only quiet strength. "I think differently," he said simply. "That is all." That night, Serenia could not rest. His words replayed in her mind. His eyes haunted her thoughts. She had ruled with fear and power her whole life. None had ever dared meet her gaze without trembling, except this human. It was infuriating. And yet, it was something else as well. A week later, another council session was held. Arguments filled the hall once more, nobles shouting over each other. Elias spoke again, offering reason, calm logic. But this time, Serenia's patience snapped. Silence. She shouted, her voice echoing through the chamber. All fell quiet. She turned on Elias, her glare sharp as a blade. "You are human," she said, her voice dripping with scorn. "You are weak. You have no place in Velthari matters. Do not think your calm face makes you my equal." The hall was silent, nobles watching eagerly. At last they thought the queen would put the human in his place, but Elias did not flinch. He did not argue. He simply looked at her. His gaze was steady, unshaken. There was no anger in it, no fear, no begging. Only something deeper and unspoken truth. "You may command an empire, but you will not command my spirit." For the first time, Serenia felt a crack in her armor of pride. His gaze was not one of defiance, nor of submission. It was something she could not name, but it shook her more than any battle had. The nobles saw nothing. To them, it was just silence. But Serenia felt it like a storm beneath the surface. That night, alone in her chamber, she shivered again, but not with disgust this time. With something she did not understand, because in her mind she kept seeing his eyes. The Velthari throne room was never silent for long. The nobles argued daily, voices sharp as blades, each one desperate to prove strength. Yet the storm on the horizon grew darker with every passing hour. The Krith Dominion, ancient rivals of the Velthari, had begun to move. Fleets massed along the borders, worlds whispered of invasion. The Krith were brutal, cunning, and merciless. To them, the Queen's marriage to a human was not a sign of peace. It was weakness. And predators always struck when weakness was shown. Queen Serenia sat in the high chamber, her crown heavy, her thoughts restless. She had ruled for decades without fear, but now unease gnawed at her heart. Her nobles argued for pride, for glory, for reckless battle. None of them seemed to see the danger clearly. Only one man in that chamber had looked calm. Only one voice had spoken reason, and he was human commander Elias Kale. In the days that followed, the invasion began. Outlying colonies fell to the Krith. Refugees fled across the stars, carrying tales of fire and slaughter. The Velthari fleets rushed to respond, but their movements were disorganized. Every noble lord wanted command. Every general believed their own strategy flawless. And in the center of it all, Elias stood quietly watching. Serenia found him in the strategy hall one night, alone, staring at the star maps. His hands moved across the glowing display, shifting fleets, drawing patterns, testing scenarios. "You plan as though you were one of my generals," she said coldly. Elias did not look up immediately. His eyes remained on the map, his voice calm. "Your nobles see only pride. They fight battles to prove themselves. But the Krith fight to win, and they will succeed unless someone thinks differently." Finally, he looked at her. His gaze was steady, as always. "Let me lead." The Queen stiffened. "You, a human. My nobles would call it madness." "They already do," Elias said. "But they have not stopped to ask themselves why Earth still stands. Your fleets crushed us, yet we never yielded. That is because humans fight wars differently. We use what others ignore. We turn weakness into weapons." Serenia held his gaze longer than she meant to. That quiet strength in his eyes unsettled her still, but now it stirred something else as well. "Very well," she whispered. "I will give you one chance. Fail, and you will lose more than pride." Elias bowed slightly, not in fear but in respect. "I will not fail." The announcement shook the court. Nobles were furious when Serenia granted Elias temporary command over a joint force. They called it an insult, a disgrace, a betrayal of Velthari honor. But Elias did not argue with them. He simply prepared. His first act was strange to the Velthari commanders. Instead of gathering the largest fleets for a grand strike, he broke them apart into smaller, flexible groups. He used human officers alongside Velthari generals, forcing them to work together despite their pride. He turned abandoned colonies into traps, leaving false signals to lure Krith fleets into ambushes. The Krith, expecting predictable battles of power, found themselves tricked again and again. They struck at a weak Velthari station, only to be surrounded by hidden ships. They pursued fleeing vessels only to crash into minefields. Slowly, the Krith advance slowed. The nobles grumbled, but results silenced them. Serenia watched it all with growing unease. She had allowed Elias command only to silence his insistence, but now she saw him do what none of her generals had achieved. His mind worked in ways her people had never considered, at war councils. He stood tall among towering Velthari, his voice calm, his ideas clear. When a general mocked him, Elias did not flare in anger. He explained patiently, his gaze never wavering. Sometimes his plans sounded mad, but then they succeeded. Serenia found herself watching him more than she admitted. His presence no longer felt like weakness beside her throne. It felt like something dangerous, something powerful, for the first time in her reign. She wondered if her empire's survival depended not on fear or pride, but on this human's quiet strength. The Krith, angered by repeated defeats, finally unleashed their full might. An enormous fleet gathered at the border, preparing for a decisive strike toward the Velthari core worlds. The nobles panicked. Some demanded retreat, others begged the Queen to take full control. Many argued Elias had been lucky and would now lead them all to ruin. But Serenia silenced them. "He commands still," she declared, her voice sharp. "If you doubt him, then doubt me. And if you doubt me, you doubt your queen." The nobles fell silent. None dared challenge her openly. Elias called his officers together. On the glowing star map, the Krith fleet was a storm, vast and deadly. The Velthari forces looked pitiful by comparison. "We cannot outmatch them ship for ship," Elias said. "So we will not try." He laid out his plan. They would not fight as the Velthari always had, in straight lines and grand formations. Instead, they would strike like hunters. They would sacrifice abandoned colonies, tricking the Krith into overextending. They would use speed, deception, and chaos. Every weakness would become a weapon. Velthari generals were shocked. "This is madness," one hissed. Elias met his gaze calmly. "It is survival. And survival is all that matters." The battle began. The Krith swept forward, confident of victory. But again and again, their fleets stumbled into traps. Empty colonies exploded with hidden charges, crippling their supply lines. Small Velthari groups appeared, struck hard, and vanished before retaliation. Confusion spread among the Krith ranks. At the heart of it all, Elias led from the front. He commanded not from safety, but aboard a strike vessel, where danger was greatest. His calm orders inspired those around him. Velthari soldiers who once mocked him now followed without question. Serenia watched the battle unfold from her command throne. Her chest tightened each time his ship vanished into the storm of fire. She told herself it was duty, that she feared the loss of strategy. But in her heart, she knew it was more. For the first time, she feared losing him. The climax came when the Krith flagship advanced, its weapons tearing through Velthari lines. The nobles screamed for retreat, but Elias saw opportunity. "We strike the head," he said firmly. With a small fleet, he drove straight into the enemy's heart. Explosions lit the void. Ships burned, but Elias pressed on. His eyes never wavered, his voice never shook, and at last, his strike team reached the flagship through cunning maneuvers. They crippled its engines and shattered its command bridge. The Krith fleet fell into chaos, leaderless and broken. The battle was won. Silence fell over the throne hall when news reached them. The Velthari had survived. The Krith retreated, their invasion shattered. Serenia stood before her court, the nobles gathered in uneasy awe. At her side stood Elias, weary but unbowed. "My people," she declared, her voice echoing. "Today we stand because of him, not because of fear, not because of pride, but because of strength of will." She turned toward Elias, her gaze soft for the first time. "He is no pet. He is no ornament. He is my equal." The hall was silent. Nobles who once mocked now lowered their eyes. Soldiers whispered his name with respect. Serena's heart beat fast as she looked at him. The human who once disgusted her now stood as the shield of her empire. And more than that, when she met his gaze, she no longer shivered with disdain. She shivered with something she could finally admit. Trust, and perhaps something deeper. Across the galaxy, whispers spread. Of a human who stood unbroken before alien thrones. Of a man whose gaze never faltered, even before empires. The Velthari had tried to bind humanity with chains of marriage. Instead, humanity had shown them something greater, and the stars would never forget.